This is the Flyerdelphia Podcast, part of SportsTalkPhilly.com, with Kevin Durso, Rob Riches, and Dan Heaning. Hello, Flyers fans, and welcome to another edition of the Flyerdelphia Podcast, part of SportsTalkPhilly.com. I'm your host, Kevin Durso, joined by Rob Riches and Dan Heaning, and we've got a lot to get to this week. 3 more games in the books. And again, guys, different narratives on all 3. The Flyers managed to pull out a win in rare fashion at home in a shootout, 6-5 against Florida on Tuesday. They fell literally to the Columbus Blue Jackets on Thursday, 6-3. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. And on Saturday, they rebounded with a strong 5-2 win over the New Jersey Devils. So I'm just going to throw it out there, guys. I don't really have anything to start off with. I'm going to let you guys have the floor to start. What were your thoughts on the games this week? You know, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
That Tuesday game against the Panthers, it was something. I don't necessarily know what that was. That game was all over the place. That game was back and forth. That was something where it very much looked like the Flyers were able to kind of close the door in the second period. That was a 5-goal second period. It looked like they just about had it, and then sure enough, Florida was able to get right back into it, and the game ended up being settled in a shootout.
Yeah, I got some mad issues to talk about on this episode, just because going through these 3 games, what was Dave Hakstol doing with the lineup? Now, I'm not one of these guys that's like all into like a lineup optimization, because I think like what you think so highly of your lines that you think the head coach is doing a worse job, but like. Why did Cal Pickard start against Columbus? That didn't make any sense to me. Like, he didn't play bad, but he let in a few goals that were not great. And then Brian Elliott came right back against New Jersey and played really good. And then what happened to Mikhail Vorobiev? Why is he he on an island now? Like, he made the team. He had a really strong preseason. Now all of a sudden, like, He was benched against Columbus, where we got our first Corbin Knight sighting, which I don't mind Corbin Knight playing at all.
But that's the annual rookie healthy scratch.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Why is he not playing? Especially when you have a guy like I don't mind Corbin Knight playing. I don't mind Jordan Weal playing, but like there's Yuri Laterra, there's Dale Weiss, there's room to fit Mikhail Vorobiev. Well, if you're not going to play him, put him back in Lehigh Valley. I get the idea of, he can learn from the press box. He doesn't have to play in every game. It just struck me as like, Dave Hakstol, what's going on? Like, you have to do this to every single rookie, especially this early in the season.
So early in the season.
Yeah. And I had issues with him, with Dave Hakstol's decisions a little earlier, like in the last podcast, I was saying, why is Folin playing? Why is Gudas being scratched instead of, Andrew McDonald? Andrew McDonald's having injury issues. I thought he was listening to me, but I found out before we started taping that it was because Andrew McDonald had a kid.
I don't know how much that's true though, because see, I understood it for Tuesday when McDonald didn't play, and that was actually like it happened to be the night that the baby was born and all stuff like that. Then he's kept him out of the lineup on Thursday and again on Saturday. And my thought there was, okay, now there's a little bit more substances, because nobody knew that the scratch on Tuesday had to do with anything with him having a kid. And then when he was still not factoring into the lineup after the fact, I at least thought this shows that something's not right here. Something's clearly. It's got to be, they won't call it injury related, but it's got to be tied into it in some way, because of the fact that you don't keep him out of the lineup for no reason. I understand if you want to call it a healthy scratch, that's fine, but it was performance based. He's not playing up to his full potential or what he's usually capable of, because he's not healthy enough, and he rushed himself back from injury. So you can call it what you will, but we kind of know what it is.
So what you're saying is Dave Hakstol actually does listen to me.
I think so, actually.
Nah, because it was just weird. Like, I'm not gonna go into the whole thing. It's just like Radko Gudas is actually playing really good now. Like, they made it a point to bring that up on multiple game broadcasts. He's actually playing very well. He's got 5 assists already this season. He's playing. He's not like giving a puck away all the time. He does have that tendency to go for the hit more than he should, but he's playing well. And he got scratched in the second game of the season, and I sometimes I just wonder what Dave Hakstol is doing, and I'm not saying that he's putting out the worst possible lineup, but if you have a rookie like Mikhail Vorobiev, who I feel like third line center might have been a little bit too much for him to absorb, because third line center is actually a pretty important, position. Now it's more offensive than it was, but like, back when I was a kid, third line center was the guy who, you kind of ate it. You had to like peel back. You had to play defensive. You had to shut down Joe Sakic or Steve Yzerman or Eric Lindros or Peter Forsberg. You had to do that. And then maybe you could chip in offensively. Now it's more like chip in offensively, but still be, responsible defensively. And I felt like that might have been too much for Vorobiev. And one of the big reasons that I'm not completely happy with it is because Vorobiev can play penalty kill. And then you have Dale Weiss going out there. Like, he keeps it, like Dale Weiss keeps his head on a swivel on the penalty kill. There was a couple power play goals that they gave up in this week span where like Dale Weiss is like not, he's watching the puck handler instead of watching where his stick is or watching where this man is. There's a lot more growth for Vorobiev on the penalty kill than you have with Dale Weiss.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Flyers penalty kill, and we knew we were going to get into this again because as long as it continues to be a problem, it's going to be a topic. The thing with the penalty kill to me is there's parts of it that I like and there's parts of it I don't like. I like the adjustment that was made, and they're being a little bit, starting with the Vegas game the previous week, they have been a little bit more aggressive in terms of coming up and trying to attack in the neutral zone first to prevent the zone entry being clean. And that has worked to some point. Once a team gets set up, they still kind of cower back and the defensemen are not clear in the front of the net. It allows for easy screens. It allows for rebound chances. They're getting beat with the cross-ice pass really easily. So their setup, once the opposing power play gets set up, is all over the place and it's a mess. I do like the way that Scott Lawton and Michael Raffl are playing on the penalty kill. I think they've been two of the best penalty-killing forwards that the team has had so far. Obviously, you're not going to doubt Sean Couturier in that spot. When Claude Giroux's playing in that spot, you're not going to kind of shy away from that. They don't like to use Giroux overly in that situation just because they like for him to be fresher for the other situations. But I don't have a problem with those guys either. It kind of stems back to usually the other two forwards in rotation are Yuri Laterra and Dale Weiss. And for the strange part to me about it is that this is clearly their area of where they're lacking, I would say. I actually really, quite honestly, don't have a problem with the way the fourth line is played. In most cases, they've done something to be mildly productive, not even in terms of points. They'll generate a scoring chance here and there. They'll do what they have to do to really prevent anything happening against them, and they'll take their 30-second shift or 45-second shift to eat up some time and let the top players rest, and they'll get off the ice. And they really haven't been a problem area for the team like they were in years past. It's using those guys to be aggressors on the penalty kill, I would say. Like, they have to put those guys at forward on the penalty kill is asking them to do a job that they're not supposed to do for more than 30 to 45 seconds at 5-on-5, and now you're giving an opposing team more time and space to get creative. And these are two skilled players here. I find it interesting because even look at the New Jersey game on Saturday and you go, the Devils get 2 power play goals, and I don't recall them scoring a power play goal with the top unit on the ice, or even if they did, the second one I believe was, but it doesn't go to a player that you expect to be the first guy to shoot. It's Kyle Palmieri sets up in front of the net. You're thinking they're going to look for him for a one-timer at some point. Taylor Hall was probably on the ice at that point, and he's setting up in a spot, but he's not the one who's going to get that chance either in this situation because they do have him tightly marked or whatever. But it's not necessarily those skill guys. I think I've seen them get scored on more recently anyway. They're getting scored on in the last 30 seconds of a penalty kill because it's usually the second time through for some of these forwards and some of these defensemen as well. And it's like for that brief period, they get caught in a mistake or they just miss a coverage and it's an easy goal for the other team. And it's much like what Dave Hakstol said about Thursday's game and eliminating the home run plays and finishing your shifts. That's penalty kill too. You want to finish your shifts. Finishing your shift in the penalty kill situation is basically for lack of a better term, icing the puck where there's obviously no icing call against you. Just clear the zone, and then you can get off the ice and the other unit comes on and you can continue to roll with it. But that's finishing your shift, and you should be doing everything you can positionally to stay in the way and to prevent a good scoring chance. And in both cases, it looks like a player is just aiding in the cause because they're either not clearing the front of the net to allow a screen, or maybe they're providing the screen themselves. There wasn't really much that Brian Elliott was supposed to do on Saturday about either of those goals when they're both going top shelf over the shoulder at a good speed and there's a screen involved. What is he supposed to do? The only thing I think he could have done differently on the second goal that Boyle scored was, if you want to try to get a goalie interference call out of it, you got to act it up a little bit more than just kind of being blank about it and taking it for what it is because the puck went in the net. If the puck went in the net and you didn't think you could make the save, have a little bit more of a reaction. Act like you're impeded a little bit more. I don't think he does a good enough job of it, but that's not here or there at this point because the goals are still getting scored because of time and space and not really coming up on the puck carrier. And I think I don't see that when it's not even I don't see that, but it's usually the guy that's at fault on those things is not the guys I was talking about. It's not Lawton or it's not Raffel. It's guys who have been playing in the back end already and are already playing that passive style. And then it comes down to defensemen because I'm not seeing goals being scored from the higher points. They're not getting scored on the power play from point shots. They're getting scored on from either deflections in front by good screens or these cross-ice passes that are easy to connect with because there's nobody covering that front part of the net or the passing lane across the front of the crease. That's where I'm seeing issues. But other than that, I mean, I see the point of Dale Weiss being part of the penalty kill, like in terms of, and that being a problem. I don't have a problem with many of the other guys that are on the penalty kill, though. And I think the only issue I really ran into with that is on Thursday, you have the Columbus game, you pull Vorobiev from the lineup, you put Corbin Knight in, and the object of this is, oh yeah, he's supposed to be a guy who's going to do some stuff with and be part of the penalty kill, and then he's not in the forward rotation. So what's the point of him being in the lineup besides being a fourth line body? And why couldn't Vorobiev be that if he's not going to play PK either? I don't get it.
Yeah, the problem is that you have this Dave Hakstol has this habit of trying to get his young players to run through like a wall to try and like get into the lineup, but then you have like the veterans that can just like stroll right into the lineup. Like I'm not saying that Jori Lehtera or Dale Weiss didn't like work and they didn't like get waived. Dale Weiss got waived, and then have to be reassigned to the AHL, but then come back and play. Like at this point, like. You have a couple injuries. Dale Weiss can get into the lineup when you have a couple injuries. Jori Lehtera can, he can play center. He can play wing. He should be in the lineup. My big thing is if you're trying to develop a young player like Vorobiev, who clearly has a higher ceiling than either Jori Lehtera or Dale Weiss, and if either one of those guys is still on the team beyond this season, it's like, you don't have much chance of that. But Vorobiev is somebody you want to develop into a bottom six type guy who can kill penalties, who might be able to play on the power play. You don't know with him. What do you do? You can bench him, put him in the press box for a couple games, but you should have some sort of spring in your step to try and get him back in there and kill those penalties. Because obviously there's going to be some growing pains with him because he's a kid. This is his first NHL season. He's a rookie. He's going to make mistakes.
Maybe every 15 games, or after 15 games or what have you, you want to take him out of the lineup. It's not, set him out for a game or so just so he can kind of get that different vantage point. It's not the worst case scenario, but yeah, like as we talked about earlier, just this early in the season, I just don't really know how that's beneficial, how that really helps out, and how veteran players just get that longer leash.
And this is why I wanted to bring it up too. Jordan Wheel did not have the greatest game in the world on Saturday against the Devils. Like he took a couple minors, and if you remember, he kind of had somewhat of an episode in like his last minor where he was like Jim Jackson said, distraught. He looked distraught in the penalty box. Like he was very upset that he took that penalty. And I actually think I know why. It's because he could feel his roster spot slipping away from him because he's been scratched for reasons that I can't really comprehend early on in this season. And if you have that kind of lineup, I'm kind of speculating in this with this kind of, hearsay. But if you have a lineup where everybody's like, if you make the slightest mistake, you're worried you're going to go to the press box, That's not the greatest way to run a hockey team. You want guys to be able to feel a little comfortable, even if they make a couple mistakes.
Here's the thing for me with Dave Hakstol at this point too, because I actually thought that he had pulled some of the right strings at different points in time this week. He's always been a second guesser in terms of should I have used my timeout? Should I have changed goalies? Hindsight's, and he'll say it in press conferences a lot. Hindsight's 20/20. Well, of course it is. But when are you going to learn from some of these mistakes? And on Tuesday, he's not satisfied with the way that Ryan Elliott's playing, even in a situation where they're leading, or he's not satisfied with the way the team's playing. So he tries to send a message and change his goalies. They get scored on again anyway because they let up another one of those home run chances the other way. It's a breakaway for one of the best shootout guys, one of those best hands in the league kind of guys. Alexander Barkov gets free. Now, look, from my perch in the press box, I could have told you that the puck was going to go in the net when he crossed the red line, halfway up the ice. As soon as you recognize who's got the breakaway there, you know what's going to happen at the end because first of all, it's the second shot attempt that Cal Pickard was going to face in that game after entering in relief. And it's the best, essentially the best shootout guy in the league. And as the best shootout guy in the league or close to it, do you think he's not going to be able to pull something out there that he's going to, that he's not going to be able to score on? Of course he is. So at the same time, while I like the idea of trying, and then Dave Hakstol called a timeout after that. Okay, I like that idea. And then to follow it up as, McDonald was the one who came out of the lineup and Folan goes back in. Understood. If Folan's going to have to play, it should be for somebody who's not playing as well because he's physically hurt. Okay, McDonald probably isn't in the best physical shape because it's hard to go through training camp, have an injury, try to get yourself back, and he didn't play much in the preseason. He played a couple games, but he didn't play much in the preseason. And you go, all right, maybe he just wasn't ready to go. He tried to rush back. Admirable effort to try to be in the lineup, but you're not there yet, and you can't help the team in this state, so he comes out. When Vorobiev came out and Knight went in, I at least thought, if it is a way to improve the penalty kill and try to use him as a fourth liner for a game since he's healthy enough, I think I get it to some extent. I don't like seeing Vorobiev in the press box, but at the same time, I'm like, if it's a 1-game thing or a 2-game thing, I have a little more understanding for it. If he's out of the lineup on Monday against Colorado, I don't know what he's doing here anymore. I think he should be in the minor leagues, getting playing time. He's a top line forward in the minors because of his little taste of experience in the NHL. He's definitely a power play guy in Lehigh Valley. He's definitely a PK guy in Lehigh Valley. And I think they'd love to have a guy like that if he's not going to be getting the playing time at the NHL level. If you're going to keep giving the kid a shot, he should be playing on Monday somehow. I don't care if he's playing on the fourth line. And you take a guy like Weiss or Laterra out of the picture. I've liked everything else that Hakstol's done otherwise. Defensively, this team was horrible on Thursday against Columbus. And finally, it looks like Hakstol looks at the lineup and goes, I can't keep Ivan Provorov and Shane Gostisbehere together any longer because I'm forcing that to be the top pairing and everybody else needs a little bit of help. Even for as well as Radko Gudas has played early in the season, and he's played well with Travis Sanheim too, I might add. So good on Dave Hakstol there for going into Saturday's game and leaving that pairing untouched. I liked them together as it was. They're just playing the most limited minutes out there. So I understood that. To move Shane Gostisbehere to play with Folan and to put Robert Haig on a pairing with Ivan Provorov changed the dynamic a little bit. You watch Folan play with Haig, or not even watch Folan play with Haig, but watch Folan's game, watch Haig's game. Defensively, they're almost one and the same in a way because of the fact that they both are physical. Haig looks for the hit anytime he can get it and is working on kind of boxing out and being that physical presence. And he's working on winning battles in the corners and things like that. And Folan goes out and lays a few good hits as well. But his thing is also stay at home, be near the front of the net. And you have two guys like that who are also not afraid to stray away from that and go lay a hit. It creates a recipe for disaster. So you put Haig out there with Provorov. Provorov can be the puck-moving guy. Gostisbehere can be the puck-moving guy with Folan, and Sanheim can be the puck-moving guy with Gudas. It makes a lot of sense to build them like that. Then you go to the forwards. To change up the forward lines after that Thursday game also was a smart move. Jake Voracek comes off the top line. Didn't have a great game in Columbus. He drops off. He goes on to the third line. Now he's playing with Nolan Patrick and Scott Lawton. Nolan Patrick's fresh back into the lineup. Jordan Wheel's line has the best game out of any forward line in Columbus. So Wheel gets to keep centering the second line with Travis Konechny and Oscar Lindblom. And I thought that all of that made total sense based on what we had seen from Thursday to Saturday. And sure enough, it worked in some capacity because the third line ended up getting 2 of the 3 goals with a goalie in the net. And then you had a couple others. The second power play unit gets a goal, and that's also Konechny, Wheel, Sanheim all contributing in that one. And 2 empty netters. I'm really actually pleasantly surprised with the way that Dave Hakstol adjusted in the lineup there. I just don't get the idea of Vorobiev continuing to sit out if there's a spot for him. I can understand that maybe space is becoming limited because, hello, I mean, Nolan Patrick misses a few games. He's back after, I think he missed 3 total. He's back. And then eventually here, maybe not, it won't be this week. It won't be next week. There's nothing that indicates it'll be any time ahead of schedule, but at some point, James Van Riemsdyk is going to have to start skating again and become a part of the lineup again. And if he does become part of the lineup again, obviously you're going to have to fit him in somewhere. It quite possibly takes Scott Lawton off the third line, and he's played really well as a third liner, mind you, and it pushes him back to the fourth line, and you have him with Raffle and pick a guy here. It could be, at that point, it could be Vorobiev. It could be, take your pick. It could be Jordan Wheel at that point, depending on how things cycle. But I see Dan's point here, too. You don't want to have guys who are afraid of one mistake. I've been really surprised by the way Ivan Provorov's played at times because he's come out and I can safely say in the last 3 home games that I've been to, the previous Saturday against Vegas, Tuesday against Florida, and Saturday against New Jersey, he's found a way to make a turnover fairly early in the game. And it's usually something bad. Saturday against the Devils, it was right up the middle of the ice from his own corner, and it didn't get out of the zone, so it almost set up a good scoring chance maybe 15 seconds into the game. And you start to wonder, there's a lot of people who are asking, well, is he hurt? What's the deal? I just think it's a confidence issue. You have to have good things happen to you to continue to want to make the plays like that and be a big player. And for him to get a good assist on the Voracek goal, and he got another assist on the empty netter for Simmons, I believe, by kind of blocking a shot up high, but you'll still take the points any way you can get them too, because from maybe the midway point of the first period on, I thought Provorov actually looked more like the defenseman that the Flyers had drafted years ago, the one that played his first 2 seasons in the NHL with a lot of real prowess, like veteran style, and really having good hockey knowledge. And I don't know where it's for a little while you were starting to get to, where has all of this gone? Where has Ivan Provorov, that was the top pairing, far and away best defenseman on the Flyers, potentially a guy who could be a Norris Trophy nominee down the road, all that type of stuff. And you're going, that's not who this guy is right now. He's clearly not doing what he's capable of doing. And I'd look at that, and that's a little bit of a concern. So you think about guys like that too, and the way we judge guys like that. You cycle people around in a lot of different ways, and performance-based, I don't think Provorov's coming out of the lineup for any reason, but you wonder, how much longer do you do this before they try to find out that there's an injury associated with the guy, or that he's just not playing the same role that he used to be. It's different. I think it's a little different for forwards, but nonetheless, sometimes you feel like there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions to some of these lineup decisions. If Hakstol feels like he's lost Vorobiev a little bit, and I'm not denying what he's seeing there in a couple of recent games. Vorobiev's presence wasn't as big in the last couple games he's played in than it was in the first game of the season or that first weekend where he gets his first NHL goal and all of that type of stuff. It's just a matter of, you got to let him work out of his slump in his own way, though, too. You got to let him learn. And I understand maybe learning can come from the press box. And at the same time, I laughed about it because on Saturday, it wasn't surprising that he was still a healthy scratch, because I jokingly kind of called it he's still a healthy scratch and going to watch and try to learn a game from the press box, because if he learned anything from Thursday's game, it was a big what not to do video. Don't cover this way. Don't make this kind of a pass. Don't do this. And it's like, if you want to show him by example here what he should be doing on a power play, on a penalty kill, what he has to do, then you kind of want the team to give you a good effort. And I thought at the very least Saturday should have done that. I don't know if he factors back into the lineup or how, but he should soon. I don't see any reason why you're not playing the kid. And if you're not, and you decide that before going into Thursday's game or something like that, Mondays is a little quick, but Thursdays, just get him out of here and get him back to the Phantoms where he can play until you feel like you need him or want him here for the full go.
I do agree with you in terms of Ivan Provorov as well. If I feel, because I was binge watching 2 of the games today, and just watching him play, I could swear if he's got a goal, maybe I don't think assists really help you too much in terms of confidence, but if he was able to score a goal, I think that would probably get him at least take a little bit of that weight off of his shoulder, because there's some expectations. I don't deny that I'm one of those types of people that are like, yeah, Ivan Provorov could win he could win the Norris Trophy this year. It's just when you have that kind of expectation, I don't think that Ivan Provorov is unaware that at this point in his career, he's had 2 really good seasons, and people expect you, when you have 2 really good seasons, that you take that next step to elite status. And I think he might be feeling that. So if he can get a goal, maybe he'll be able to settle back into his own skin a little bit and, play the way that Ivan Provorov plays. I don't think that Ivan Provorov is going to turn into Erik Karlsson overnight, but he can definitely, if he settles and he plays the game that he plays, he can be his own type of player that hits that elite status. Obviously, Erik Karlsson is over here where he can just possess the puck for, minutes at a time and no one can take it away from him. But Ivan Provorov is more the type of guy that can do everything. He can be more of a master of all trades type thing. In this situation, you really just have to still consider that he's young. He's, he maybe he can't take that kind of expectation yet. So he kind of, I don't know, I don't want to use the term folding, but he's kind of buckling a little bit under the pressure. But it is still October. So, it takes time, and you can, if he gets that one goal, maybe like I said before, he can settle back into his own game and slowly get all of that, his positioning back, and not make those, weird, because maybe he's just trying to make too many big plays too early, because it's oh yeah, I'm supposed to be this really good player.
Well.
Yeah, he could. I don't like to speculate too much about a guy being hurt if he's, I haven't seen any evidence of him being hurt on the ice as well. It doesn't look like he's a step slower to me, but maybe I'm not, observing that the best that I could.
I'll say this for him. For one, I thought that as the game went on Saturday, he started to get better with just even something as routine as outlet passes. It was smaller, shorter passes, crisper. That little bit of doing it repetitively can build confidence. And his 1 assist on Jake Voracek's goal, I thought was a little bit telling, because you have to be that's a play you got to make with a little bit of conviction. You're going to backhand up the wall. You've got a guy a little bit up there, but you got to make sure you get enough on it to get it past those guys and still hit the guy for the odd man rush. And he does that. And that was the type of play that I think he knows he can make, or always knew he could make. And we've seen him make in years past. You just wanted him to take a step forward. That's why I credit the point to being maybe a little bit of a confidence builder, because that's not necessarily the highest percentage play, but he pulled it off, and he pulled it off well. And Voracek goes the other way, gets the 2-on-1, puts a move on Keith Kincaid, and the puck ends up in the net. And with basically just over 3 minutes left in a game, the Flyers have a lead that they, where for a change, it's the difference between a game from 1 week to the next. It's role reversal. It's not giving up the late goal like they did against Vegas and getting nothing to show for it. It's now they're in position to finish off a game and get the 2 points they think that they deserve. The other thing I'll say about confidence, and I'll answer to Dan's point with scoring a goal, is what better example of what could happen to Ivan Provorov if he could get a goal than Travis Konechny, who finally got his first goal of the season, not for a lack of trying, of course, on Thursday against Columbus, and then he comes out and he scores a power play goal against New Jersey the next game. And it's kind of like it's starting this little roll here. He's building up that confidence. He's got one that finally goes in, and that quickly there's a second goal to follow. And who knows what the next week's going to look like with him, because it could turn into something similar. if he can keep building on that one goal, okay, he's getting a little bit of a scoring touch back, and the puck finds the net a couple times. That's always good. But if that can be, if it can work for one guy like that, it can certainly work for another. And I think Provorov being in the same draft year as Konechny and things like that, I think that they would have a similar mindset. And if he could just get one, yeah, maybe it would do a lot for him.
I have to say as well, just speaking on the terms of in terms of confidence, I really like the way that Travis Sanheim's been playing. I think he's been playing really confidently in all three zones. I'll use an example. It was against New Jersey. I think it might have been the first period where the game was tied. And the Flyers, I believe, were either shorthanded or if it was 5-on-5. My memory's kind of fuzzy right now. But the Devils were going to poke the puck out of the zone. I think the Devils were shorthanded. I think the Flyers were on the power play. The Devils were going to poke the puck out of the zone because Wheel had made a bad pass back to the point. And Sanheim completely stood his ground. He kept the puck in the zone the entire time, did not allow the Devils to get out of the zone and go like on a 2-on-1 odd man rush that may have been a goal, may not have been, but he was able to keep the puck in there the entire time and pretty much turn into a puck battle, which I actually really thought was a great play because he was put in really a bad position by Wheel. And then there was another situation last week where he was shorthanded. I think this was against Ottawa, where he completely controlled the right boards, where like they tried to send it down low, he cut it off and just sent it right back down low and sent it right out of the zone. I didn't really think that Travis Sanheim would make that kind of jump defensively. He might have had every once in a while he have a couple gaps, but Sanheim in my eyes has actually really turned out to be like the type of defenseman that you could actually point at and be like, this guy can definitely be a second pairing guy. As soon as they feel like they want to give him more minutes.
Yeah, I thought Saturday was one of his best games so far. And not just by the stat line, he did have 2 assists in the game too, but I think the way that he's playing is a lot better than what it was a year ago. He's just, his positioning is a little bit more sound. I think he got caught in a little bit of an unfortunate situation on the first New Jersey goal, just because it was a shot where he kind of was providing a little bit of a semi-screen. It doesn't mean that he was in the wrong spot necessarily. He could have probably come out and challenged a little bit more, or if you're going to stand in the way of your goalie, you probably want to try to block the shot at all costs. So that's a little bit of a positioning thing, but I don't think otherwise his positioning has been bad. I think he's done a good job of moving the puck well too. So I think I like what I've seen so far from him. I do think he's got a lot of potential and a good ceiling for him too. Now, let's kind of shift gears here, guys, because one of the things I wanted to talk about also, and we've talked a little bit about the penalty kill and talked about some of the defensemen and things like that. There are parts of the power play that I like a lot, but I'm getting concerned a little bit about the first power play unit because at times you're still seeing that need to look for the perfect play. And I get it in some cases. You have a little bit more time and space. You want to set a guy up and make it easy, but I almost get the sense that there's this need to find the perfect play or create the perfect play and pull it off perfectly in terms of execution. And it seems like that's keeping the first unit from actually getting a quality scoring chance sometimes because they look for it and other teams start to kind of get into that mindset and kind of understand it maybe the second time they play them or something like that. So I kind of wanted your take on this, guys, because for the first time in a long time, Saturday gave you a second power play unit goal, which doesn't happen a lot, obviously, but it's also to me, it's also just watching, there was a point in time last season, I think, that where the top unit was money at a certain point, where everything that, you gave them a power play, they were probably scoring on it. And for the Flyers to come out in the first period and second period of those, for power play situations and get 5 of them. I mean, they scored on the first one, so credit there. But the next 4 were just not nearly as crisp and not really pushing for that goal that could have really separated the game. I mean, it made it turn into a situation where New Jersey was able to tie the game on a second power play goal. They looked at goalie interference. It was not quite, so forget that. It was, then they lose that lead anyway. But you also were looking at, it wasn't just the penalty kill giving up a goal in a spot where they were only taking their third power play, and it was the second time, New Jersey's on their third power play, and they've scored 2 power play goals as a result of those 3 power plays. It's if the Flyers could just get one more power play goal in that spot, it's only a 3-2 game. It's only a 3-2 game. It's not a tie game, and it doesn't change the whole outlook of the game. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, guys, just because, it's not like it's a personnel issue. They're throwing out probably the best unit they can between Claude Giroux, Jake Voracek, Sean Couturier, Wayne Simmons, and Shane Gostisbehere. It's just a matter of finding a way to finish.
I think to one degree, Kevin, it might not even just be on the power play too. I don't want to completely, change the scope of your question, but I did note in that game against the Blue Jackets that early on in the second period, when the Flyers were still had the lead, Claude Giroux was kind of like on an odd man rush, or maybe just like they had more of they had the numbers, favorable numbers down low. And instead of shooting, Claude Giroux tried to pass it, I believe, to Jake Voracek, and he missed completely. And then 45 seconds later, I believe, the Blue Jackets scored, and the entire game's changed its scope because the Blue Jackets scored 2 more goals in the next 7 minutes. And I think it might be the problem you're describing is really more of a problem of the top players looking for the perfect play. Like, obviously, with 11 points each, nobody's really going to question Giroux and Voracek's decision making. But I think that might be just something that those two guys tend to look for because they're so used to making these pretty plays.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing about, Giroux is off to a start right now where he's got points in 7 of 8 games, and obviously the one that he doesn't, it was a shutout loss, so it's understandable. But what I think I'm looking at too, and I think it's a good play that you bring up, because there was an odd man situation where Giroux tries to make a pass, and the thing that I don't like in a game like Thursdays where I'm watching it on TV or for a home game where I'm watching it from the press box, is seeing a lane for even just a split second where you feel like they have that ability. It's been really interesting to watch a guy like Jake Voracek take a couple 2-on-1s in different situations. He had one against Ottawa where he scored a goal, and he had the one on Saturday. And to see him look pass through most of that chance, moving up the ice, looking past, and then kind of realizing I should focus my attention back to the net and try to finish this off. And he won one of them, just let go a quick little snapshot, and it goes through the 5-hole. On another, he put it, on Saturday, he puts the move on Kincaid. He drops a shoulder, he fakes the pass. It keeps it, believe it or not, at one point in time, it backed the defenseman off because Damon Severson was the defenseman back covering. Andy Green was charging back as well and tried to just kind of take the passing lane away with the stick. Severson, though, actually backed off the play and kind of cut backwards towards Scott Lawton, assuming there was going to be a pass coming instead of going after Voracek. And Voracek just dropped the shoulder on Kincaid like he was going to make a pass also, and then cut around and tucked it in. And it was a really pretty goal. And I think the fact of the matter is that was one of those situations where if it's there for the taking, take the shot. I thought that's one of the things I liked about Travis Konechny's power play goal on Saturday, was that it was just one of these situations from the top of the circle, right off the faceoff. Go ahead and just step into one. Let a good shot go and see if it does something for you. And it very well might. So I thought that was really good, and I like when they're a little more decisive about that, because I think they can afford to be a little bit more decisive and pick their spots a little bit differently. So why don't we start getting into some of the games from next week and turning our attention forward a little bit as well, and just looking at some of the aspects that we were talking about. We mentioned a lot of different things. We talked about some of the changes to the lines and the lineup and everything like that. We've talked defense. We've talked special teams. And at this point, the Flyers are going to get another one of these games next week. They start next week's portion of games with Monday night against Colorado at home. And this is another team where they're going to close out the season series with them pretty early on. They did this with Vegas recently too. So it's another team they're going to close out the season series with pretty early on. Then you get another Eastern Conference matchup against Boston on Thursday on the road, which I think it's a great test for this team. I think it's a good spot for them to see what they're made of. I think one of the things I feel like I can say comfortably at this point is, after watching these 3 games, is finally on Saturday, I think you saw what the team's capable of when it all starts to fall together and when they all put forth a really strong effort. And Boston's kind of been a little bit of that Jekyll and Hyde kind of team. They've won 4 games. They've played 8. They've had a couple games where they've lost to teams that you think they should have beat. They lost in overtime to Edmonton recently, and it's like, oh, that was one. They lost in overtime to Vancouver. They've, had a couple games that I'm sure they would like back as well. They lost 5-2 to Calgary at one point in time. They've obviously, that season opener against Washington was terrible, but in between all of that, they rolled off 4 wins in a row rather convincingly. So when you finally get over that little hump here, and they're gonna play a team. This is the thing too. They're gonna play a team like Ottawa on the road before coming into Philly, or before going home to play Philly, I should say. So I think Boston's an interesting one, because Boston's a team that has a lot of good players, but realistically, I haven't. One thing I haven't liked about Boston so far is their depth has not been nearly as good as what it could be on paper. They've really been one of these teams again that is a one-line team, but the key to being a one-line team is who are the players on that one line, and it's when you got David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron, and they're kind of running the show for Boston. It's dangerous, and the Flyers can't be that team that gets caught with the home run chances again, because Marchand knows how to finish, and Pastrnak knows how to finish, and Bergeron knows how to finish. They will take advantage of chances. And then obviously you close out the week against the Islanders. And to close out the week against the Islanders, I find is interesting too, guys, because the Islanders have kind of not necessarily been that team, they're hovering. They've had some moments. They've played some games that you think, where they've come out on the winning end and they've won rather convincingly, but they're still below the Flyers in the standings, and they're where people think they would be with all the things that with everything they lost with John Tavares and everything like that. But it's not like that's a team that can't get you on any given night. You look at the way that the Islanders were able to take care of business on Thursday against the LA Kings. They win 7-2 there, but then at the same time they play a team like the Sharks on Saturday. They go out and they lose 4-1. So it's a team that may have everything to bring it against you, and they can steal a win from you, and they might be the team that everybody expects them to be, and they might fold a little bit. And I think for the Flyers, the important thing to do there is to play your game. Play the same kind of game you played against New Jersey. If you can keep them off the board, I don't see any reason why they can't score 2 or 3 or 4 goals and find a way to win this game rather handily. But it depends on how you play, and if you don't turn the puck over and keep it clean and things like that. So I think that's all important as well. What are you guys looking for out of this next week of games as we keep this season moving a little bit, especially after 8 games of the season too, guys? I think a good thing to look at is to see the Flyers after 8 games and go, it doesn't really get much more on again, off again than 4-4 and winning games in different styles.
Well, one big storyline for the Bruins in the early part of the season is Tuukka Rask. He's struggling so far at the start of the season. He's been pretty inconsistent. He's having games where he's looked decent, and then he's got other games. It happened against Calgary the other night where he just got completely shelled. You remember that season opener against Washington where he just was lit up like a Christmas tree out there. And it's one of those things where I was actually listening to an interview not too long ago with Jack Edwards, the notorious Bruins play-by-play guy over at Nesson, and it was something where he was talking about how obviously it's something like this isn't new for Tuukka Rask. It's something that he's dealt with previously. He's dealt with it before, and he's one of those guys that he might not start great, but he always kind of picks himself up as the season goes along, and then later on, once they're able to get into the springtime and get to the playoffs, he'll be able to kind of keep himself composed. So if the Flyers are able to kind of get to Tuukka Rask early, that can be a fun game, especially in a game that could be widely considered as a measuring stick kind of game where they're going to look to try to hold their own with one of the teams that was projected to be a tougher team this year in the Eastern Conference. So that's a game that I'm very much looking forward to as well. And the Colorado game on Monday is something that should also be interesting to watch, especially because, obviously that wraps the season series up. And you remember that second game of the season in Denver where it looked like the Flyers were keeping pace with the Avalanche for so long and then just kind of fell apart. And, it's one of those things where obviously they want to look for a better showing. They want to see what they can do. And Colorado, they're coming at the that's actually going to be the end of an East Coast road trip for them. So obviously, it's they got that game and then they got a getaway day after that. So it's something where maybe the Flyers can catch them on the end of a road trip, or what have you. It's something that should be interesting, and I'm looking forward to that one as well.
This stretch will be interesting. I don't think this past week was all that bad. The Flyers got 2 wins, 1 out of a shootout, but they were all against Eastern Conference teams. It's not a bad body work to beat the Devils and beat the Panthers, and then that Columbus game went sideways. But for this week, this is not necessarily. Rob told us about Rask's struggles to start the season, but it's like they don't have a stretch of games this week where you can pick somebody out and say like, all right, that's the weakest link. Like last week, you could pick out Florida and kind of be like, all right, that team hasn't won yet, so you could probably win that game, even though it's probably not going to be the way you'd like. This week, you got Colorado, who's already proven they could put 5 goals on you, and with the way their lines are structured, the way that team plays, if you're going to keep your defensive structure intact, that's going to be a hard game to do it because they have, Nathan McKinnon, they have a bunch of players that can light you up. And also they still have Varlamov, and they also have Grubauer. So either one of those goaltenders they throw at you might be able to stymie your offense as well. Boston, it's interesting because because of Rask's his struggles early this season, everyone seems to be talking about starting Halak, who's actually played very well so far this season for the Bruins. But that just seems to me like you're putting a Band-Aid on a wound that only Tuukka Rask playing at his normal level will actually like heal. Because has anybody paid attention to how Jaro Halak has played like for the last, 5 years? He's kind of inconsistent. So if you're worried about your starting goaltender, the guy who you brought in to be the backup is not who you really want to roll with. Now, Boston's also a team, like Kevin mentioned, that it can absolutely light you up if you're not paying attention. So you might have to have 2 games to start off this week where you get into another Florida Columbus situation where you're going to have to score 4, 5, maybe even 6 goals to come away with a win, which will be tough against a team that has goaltenders that aren't, playing particularly shaky like you did this week.
It is kind of funny how that shakes out because you almost have the makings of a controversy between Tuukka Rask and Jaroslav Halak, which nobody really saw coming. Like, go back to that mystical 2010 year for the Flyers and tell yourself that at some point 8 years from then, there's going to be a goaltending controversy between 2 of those goalies that the Flyers beat on their way to the Stanley Cup final. It's just, to me, that's almost hilarious.
It's also funny, too, just because Jaro Halak is probably the closest thing the Flyers had that playoff to an inside agent because he took out the Capitals and the Penguins, 2 teams that probably would have blown the doors off the Flyers in the playoffs last year. And it's like, no, guys, well, I'll get them. And then you can just absolutely, score like 4 goals on me every game. But getting back to what I was saying, like Halak's old team, the New York Islanders, that's a team that's weird. Like Kevin mentioned before, it's a team that can put, it can actually generate some offense. This is not a team. Everybody kind of thought this team was going to be one of the worst teams in the league. It's not really going to be doing much. They're in full-blown tank mode. Well, tell the Los Angeles Kings
left, so there's just nothing for them.
Yeah, it was just tell the Los Angeles Kings that. Tell Valtteri Filppula that, who has 4 goals already this season. So you're guaranteed when you go into that matinee game on Saturday that Valtteri Filppula is probably going to score at least a goal in that game in typical Flyers fashion.
With like 8 minutes to go in the third period of a 2-2 game.
Fitting.
Exactly. And that's easily the game that, like, if you look at this week, like last week, if you told me any game that the Flyers should be able to win, I probably would have said it would have been a Florida game, but that Devils game is probably ripe for the plucking as well because evenly matched. This week, you definitely have to look at that Islanders game. It's like if you win any game this week, it better be that game. And then if you lose it, because Valtteri Filppula scored with like 8 minutes left in the third period, that's a disappointing week right there.
For perspective, by the way, Filppula has 4 goals on a season, like we just said, and the Flyers only have 2 players with 4 goals or more on their roster, and that's Wayne Simmons with 6, and Scott Lawton's got 4. So I find it a little ironic that Lawton's got 4 as well, empty netters or not, because he's essentially kind of playing at different points in the season, one way or the other. He's kind of playing what Filppula's old role was. I mean, he did play third line center there very briefly for a stretch, and I find that interesting that he got got into a position where he was actually able to have a little bit more of a significant role, and he's putting himself in a position to be around the net. And good for him for sticking with it and doing what he's been doing so far, because he's having a great start to his year, and he could turn in a career year, no question. Now, I did want to comment on a couple of the matchups as well, because there's a couple different things that I've got in mind here. First of all, I want to go back to the Columbus game from Thursday really quick, because I compare that game a little bit to the first meeting against Colorado in the second game of the season, in terms of the fact that up until the very late stage of the game, it was a game. I mean, if you look at the game against Colorado, the Flyers fall behind 3-2, and that score holds until there's less than 4 minutes left, and of course, it's because they're trying to kill a penalty and they're unable to do it. That gives Colorado a 2-goal lead. They pull the goalie, and of course, it doesn't go well, and they give up another goal into an empty net. That's how you lose 5-2 to a team like Colorado. I look at the Columbus game, same thing. Here's a team, and almost the same line of falling behind by 2 goals again. You're down by 1, 4-3. You kill a penalty instead of giving up the goal that would put it away, and you're just trying to start to get yourself into a position where if you're going to start to watch the clock, because you're going to pull the goalie probably pretty soon, and you have maybe 4 minutes left before the game's over, so you have 2 minutes left before you're going to think about the goalie or whatever, and Christian Folin goes to start up the ice with the puck and just completely loses it and falls down. Loses an edge, hits a rut in the ice, whatever it was, he just falls. And then he can't recover. It's basically, it in a nice way, that's a turnover, if I'm really going to go there with that. And, of course, Columbus capitalizes on it. It's now 5-3 with about 3.5 minutes left, and the game might as well be over right there. So I look at that and I go, Monday against Colorado is a good tester, just because it's a good way to kind of come back from that first meeting earlier in the season and go, let's show them that instead of finishing a game that way and giving up the late power play goal and the game's out of reach, we're in it and we can do what we can to win a game here, especially on home ice. I don't see anything that indicates, the Flyers have played games where they've been kind of out of it from the start. Obviously the home opener against San Jose where you lose 8-2, that's a bad one. But they've had a few losses here out of the 4. In fact, realistically, 3 of them where they were either down a goal with under 5 minutes left, or they were tied with 5 minutes left in regulation, and they gave up a late goal that either made it harder to come back or cost them the game, like the Vegas game did, where it was a 1-0 final and the only goal is scored with 1:25 left. It's things like that. So I've seen, it's interesting. They played a pretty terrible game defensively against Columbus, and yet here they were in a 4-3 game. Look, they took the first 10 minutes of the second period off and gave up way too many odd man rushes and way too many situations where the goalie was going to have to bail them out. And it cost them. It cost them 3 quick goals in less than 9 minutes. And that's how that works. Because if you make those kind of mistakes, you should be prepared to fall behind, because teams capitalize on chances. But at the same time, they go out in the third period, they get a quick goal from Oscar Lindblom, which was really deceptive, by the way, a great little play where he tucks it in on the side where Sergei Bobrovsky isn't thinking about where it's going to go. And you cut the lead to 1. It's 4-3, and you play the entire third period, really starting to push the play a little bit, trying to generate a chance that may get you the tying goal. And you had the sense that if they could keep it at 1 goal, that they would probably be able to finish the job off there. They might be able to get that goal once they pull the goalie or something like that, because they're really pushing play, and they never get that opportunity because one mistake happens where Christian Folin just falls down. They give up a goal, and as soon as that happens, Columbus comes with another wave shortly after, and they score another goal. And now it's really out of reach because it's a 3-goal game after it was a 1-goal game a matter of 90 seconds earlier. I look at the Colorado game and I feel very similar to it, because it was a game where the Flyers kind of withstood a bit of a push at the beginning. They managed to get a game tied up. They gave up a go-ahead goal, and they were just coming up on that opportunity where if they killed that final penalty off, they were going to put themselves in a spot where they could think about getting the goalie out and think about pushing the other way to try to get the tying goal. And they never even get that opportunity because they give up the 4th one. They do try to pull the goalie anyway just because, and it doesn't go well because you're really trying too hard in those situations when you're down by 2 with less than a minute to go, and you just want to find a quick goal. So I want to see how competitive that game is. The Boston game, I agree with Rob. It kind of does serve as a measuring stick here, especially for an Eastern Conference opponent. You can find out and learn a lot about where you are, especially when you look at the Eastern Conference teams the team has played already to this point. They played Ottawa and they took care of business like they had to, and it wasn't the prettiest win by any stretch, but they won the game and they got the 2 points. They play Florida, who didn't have a win on the season yet, and they kind of did just about everything they could to lose the game, but managed to win in a shootout, which is rare enough as it is. And then they play Columbus and don't perform as well, and they lose that game. And they play New Jersey and have a really good game and get a win. So you want to see them. And the thing about those teams is Columbus was, I think, coming into that game on Thursday with an even record, just like the Flyers were, the same record. And against New Jersey, the Flyers were playing a team that was off to a really good start and managed to kind of come away with a good win. And it was a good way to show that they can play up to that potential. Boston provides that same challenge because Boston's a team that probably should be there when the Final Four rolls around here. If we're talking Eastern Conference Final, they're probably going to be at least in the discussion. It doesn't mean you're going to make the Eastern Conference Final in October, but they're a team that's got enough talent to be right there at the end. That Atlantic Division's got 3 teams that probably are all in the discussion between Tampa, Toronto, and Boston. And so games against those teams, no matter what point in the season it is, are good measuring sticks here. And the Islanders game is going to be that one that I think you can look at on the calendar and kind of go, it's the one that should be the easiest, if you will, of the 3, but nothing's easy in this league. And I think that's a prime example of a game where they could kind of play the trap style and, not come out with as much energy or aggression because it's the Islanders this time. Not the Bruins or not the Avalanche or not a team like the Devils that you got to really play your best at. And my thought after that Columbus game was that there was so much that was wrong with the Columbus game and the way they finished that game and the way that the mistakes were being made and everything like that. And there was a sense of enough is enough. And if you're going to talk like that, then Saturday's game was a game that you needed to win against New Jersey just to prove that you kind of took your own advice and listened to yourself. And I think that out of these next 3 games, you need to keep pace and try to win another 2 out of 3 just because you can, look, we talk about it. You don't make the playoffs in October, but you can lose ground on a playoff spot pretty quickly in October with games that you don't finish or games where you make too many mistakes. I think this is a prime situation for the Flyers to get themselves and keep themselves in position and continue to build on some good results and things like that, especially one of their best games of the year so far against New Jersey.
They also, just to continue off the point that you were making with Columbus, their second goal, the Couturier goal they scored, that was a gift by Sergei Bobrovsky, who's struggling early on in the season. If they get another gift like that, let's say against Boston, they can't do what they did against Columbus. You need to be able to take advantage of the fact that like a goaltender who's considered elite throughout the league just gave you a cupcake. You have to take advantage. And what the Flyers wound up doing is exactly what you said. For the first 10 minutes of that second period, it was just like a turnstile for goals. They didn't play that bad. They played pretty well in the first period, and they played pretty well in the third period. It was just that second period where the first half of that second period where the wheels just kind of fell off the wagon. And while you compare the Columbus game to the Colorado game, I'm eager to see if this team can actually put together a good road win because they haven't done that since the first game of the season. They haven't put together a good road win, as in like they've won on the road against Ottawa, but like a good one where it was just they only allowed 2 goals because they allowed 4 against Ottawa. They allowed 15 goals in the last 3 road games. You have to be able to put the clamps down and be able to show that you can play defense on the road because that's how you win on the road. So if they can show that they've at least come a little bit far against Boston, like maybe they can do it against Colorado because they've already seen Colorado. They know what Colorado's doing, but now you're going against like how you the both of you guys phrased it. This is a measuring stick. This is a team that's supposed to be in the discussion, even if they're in a division that will absolutely eat your lunch if you're just an average team, because you have Toronto and Tampa Bay that just they'll blow your doors off if you're not ready. Boston out of those 3 is kind of like the weakest link, but you can beat them, but if you don't take them seriously, they'll absolutely run you out of the barn. So if they can try and get the defense to a level where they're actually playing against a really good team and only allow like 2-3 goals, you might be able to say that this team is actually kind of going on the right path defensively, rather than the game against New Jersey, where it's like, if you didn't allow 2 goals against the New Jersey Devils, if you allowed like 3 or 4 or 5, then you're kind of like, all right, the defense is a mess and you got to figure out something, because the Devils, even though they're playing pretty well, they're not a team that should be blowing your doors off offensively. They're not a team that should be racking up 5 goals on you, especially if you're a team that, I know it's early, but it's a team that should be in the competition for finishing top 3 in their division. So, like, it's really early, but if you want that measuring stick, like, you always want to pick out, you don't always want to pick out, but let me rephrase this. If you go through this week and Kevin identified, like, that's the game, the Islanders game is the one that the Flyers should win. Then you have a bubble game against Colorado, because, Colorado didn't really dominate them in Colorado. Plus, you've seen them before, so you should be able to get the split there. And then you have a game where, the measuring stick, the game against Boston, then that can show Flyers fans whether this team can, hit the ceiling that they think the Flyers should have of being a top 3 metropolitan team, or Patrick Division team, as I'd like to say. Or if it's like, as you go into that road trip in 2 weeks against Anaheim, San Jose, and LA, you kind of have to figure out, all right, is expectations kind of like weighing on this team? Where is this team? Is there a problem that, that can be fixed before, November starts to get infected by it?
Yeah, I'm going to touch on 2 or 3 things that you said here. First of all, a great point I'm bringing up the gift goal from Bobrovsky there, because go back a few seconds before that goal happens for Sean Couturier and go to Columbus's first goal for a minute. It's really a goal that in hindsight should never happen, because A, you're in the middle of a line change, you get caught. You had enough time to kind of recover. Robert Haig's all over Anthony Duclair there, when reality is the reason he's all over him is because he's trying to play the puck. He should just have kind of shoved him right off of it, because there was clearly a size disadvantage for Duclair. And Folin did the same thing, goes after it and just tries to play the stick game, not I'll take the body here or I'll try to clear the front of the net if something should happen.
It just kind of stood there.
Exactly. And then Pickard's got to have it too. I mean, it wasn't like it was a hard shot from a difficult angle here. He's got to just have that no matter what, put your stick on the ice and steer it away. He's falling over. He's not going to be able to lift it. And if he does, then that's really when he can tip your cap. And look, I'm not trying to take anything away. It was an incredible goal and an incredible effort by Duclair. At the same time, you come right back down the other end. You just something as simple as Couturier throwing a shot toward the net and it goes in because Bobrovsky totally whiffs on it. You're now going to exit the first period with a 2-1 lead that in reality could have been 1-0, or maybe you were going to get stuck in a 1-1 game because of that last play. Now it's 2-1. You're playing with a lead after the first period. And really, you can come out and kind of dictate your own fate here in the second period by playing a strong period and seeing if you can build on the lead. And instead, they kind of cowered and they made the mistakes, and they weren't able to recover from those mistakes. So I find that to be a big thing. I also want to look at talk about a good road win, and a couple things with Boston too, because I think one of the things about Boston is that we talk about it as a measuring stick for potential success and being a team that you can kind of compare to see where you stand with them. And at the same time, I think you have to look at the here and now and kind of look at Boston's situation and go, they've won some games, they've lost some games. Their goaltending has been a little bit suspect. They're getting better results out of Halak than they are from Rask. So, here's the thing about playing Boston. For whatever reason, I would probably be shocked to see Halak play the game on Thursday, because Rask has got such great career numbers against the Flyers that it always seems like Rask is starting the games against the Flyers. So if they go with Halak because he's the hotter hand right now, that's a little bit of a surprise to me, but I understand why they're doing it. I just kind of fully expect to see Rask, and I think Rask could be victimized by the way that the lineup is if you can get some good chances on him. The thing about Boston that I talked about was the top line kind of being able to come in waves and being certainly capable of those home run plays that Dave Hakstol talked about. Here's the thing about Colorado. They've got a pretty good first line too. You can't ignore what Gabe Landeskog has done to start the season. You can't ignore what Nathan MacKinnon is in general. I mean, that was the runner-up for the Hart Trophy a year ago. And Mikko Rantanen, for up until maybe this season, was probably one of the best kept secrets in terms of a guy who had good goal scoring ability, but nobody really knew much about him because whether it's the market that he played in or whatever. And here's a guy who's just as dangerous. So they've got 3 really good forwards up front to start with, to begin with. And to think that that was a line that you really kind of silenced for a good chunk of that game in Colorado earlier. They weren't really, there was one goal, obviously, that they did, but for the most part, and I think they had the empty netter as well, but for the most part, that wasn't the line that factored into the scoring that changed the outcome as much, other than the third goal, which proved to be the game winner. So I find that to be pretty interesting as well. But I think it's just, to me, it depends on how this team comes out in each situation here. Monday's game is very much the toss-up, and I totally agree with that. And I think that that's a game where you're looking to get the better end to get on the right end of a result, because you kind of prove that you can hang with that team in Colorado, and now you want to finish the job. Boston's a measuring stick because there's a little bit of heat that comes with that game, because it's not, I don't want to call it, like, I don't think it's a crazy rivalry by any stretch, but I think it's a situation where two teams don't like each other. I think that's fair to say, and two franchises that have a history. There you go. And then the Islander game, where it looks like it's a game that you should be able to take, but you can't sleep on that team. So I think it's 3 different approaches, and you want to see them play Colorado well, build off of the win on Saturday. You want to see them get up for a game against Boston in Boston, because that's atmosphere, that's the opponent, that's a lot of things that factor in. And then you want to see them not sit back and not play that passive style and kind of lay down for the opponent and play down to your opponent, which we see a lot of. So 3 different methods here.
And also, just one last point on that Boston game too. Boston's kind of been a house of horrors for the Flyers, so you definitely would like to see, if you're a Flyers fan, them improve their ability to win in that barn. Just because, how many seasons have the Flyers' playoff chances been ruined by playing in Boston, or just Boston in general? But how many wins have they gotten in Boston recently? It hasn't really been all that much. It hasn't been like an even split. So you want to be able to show that not only can you beat a good team in their arena when they're kind of down, but also show that you can win in Boston, which has not been favorable for the Flyers in the last few seasons.
Well, as luck would have it, they don't have a game in Boston in March. They do have another meeting with the Bruins in Boston in January, but at the very least, you can put that season series behind you shortly after the All-Star break and forget about it until potentially the playoffs, if that's where it comes to. But, at least you can put that behind you, because games in Boston in March have been an absolute disaster. You're right, Dan. I mean, those are the games where it feels like every year they have a game in Boston in March and something goes wrong that deflates you in your playoff hopes one way or the other. It's either the end of the whole thing, or it's one of those ones where now you got to figure out where those points are coming from in one way or another. And it's that kind of thing. So it's good to see them get this kind of test early, I would say, for sure.
I have one further quick thought. This is just something that I've seen, particularly after that Columbus game, where a lot of people frustrated with the start to the Flyer season, that a lot of people think that they could be doing a lot better, and a lot of people are blaming that on Dave Hakstol. But it's not necessarily blaming Hakstol that's chapping my ass. It's one of the arguments used against him is that he's the Chip Kelly of the NHL. I'm gonna go, if I hear that argument one more time, boys, I think I'm gonna snap, because that is, honestly, that may be one of the single dumbest takes I have heard all time. I mean, it is completely ridiculous. It is a complete straw man tactic. It's like almost like Billy Madison, where it's just, what you said makes absolute, like, I am dumber for having heard it, and it's. I award you 0 points, and may God have mercy on your soul. And it's one of those things that it's an argument that I have heard ad nauseum, and it's just it makes 0 sense whatsoever. It's not even remotely close to accurate. It's people just pulling things out of their rear ends at this point, and just going with it, and it's just annoying. It's frustrating. It's a complete bad take. I don't know why people keep beating that drum, but it just is what it is at this point.
Is that just because, in terms of comparing the two figures here, Chip Kelly was supposed to be regarded like as an innovator and doing new methods and new things? It's, to me, the criticism of Dave Hakstol usually is about lacking a system, or the idea that whatever he's trying to implement as a system isn't showing. They're a systemless team. They kind of lack an identity, and that's where the lack of success has come from in some of the seasons where he's been the head coach. Not here's a guy who's trying to change the way that the league operates here and change the
I think that's a little more complex, Kevin. I think people just see, oh, bad man come from college, and a not good team that doesn't win championship. That's what I literally think it is at this point.
Okay, no, that's fair. I wasn't sure if that was the idea. Also, that because I don't like Hakstol's
argument. It's an argument that I've just encountered too much. I've seen it, a handful of times over the past few years, and it's just one of those things I've encountered way too much over the past few weeks, and it's getting to me at this point.
I hear you. Look, I'm not going to sit here and defend him to no end here because there's times where I don't agree with his lineup decisions, and
of course,
there's times, he's certainly not perfect by any stretch in what he's done so far. That being said, I don't think he's the guy coming in here just because he came from the college game that's trying to change the way the game works or do something. I'm not saying not by the book, but it's like he's
not the culture versus scheme.
Right. When I don't think he's trying to change the team's culture necessarily either. He's not trying to be a dictator here. He's working with, for a lot of those years, he was working with the pieces that Ron Hextall could give him because your hands are tied with guys who have NHL contracts that you can't just move for no reason. I think that the frustration of his lineups has been more just in recent years because of the fact that as Ron Hextall has tried to take the toys away a little bit and it brings some kids into the picture, you don't have a reason. This is why we were talking about with Vorobiev at the beginning of the show. If you don't have a real good reason for it, if you think he has something to learn from the press box, fine, do it for a game or two. But if he's not playing 3, 4, 5 games in a row, then what's he doing here? Why are you wasting a roster spot on a kid who can actually get some value on the ice for the minor league team when you're not going to play him at the NHL level? That's why we talked about it like that. And that's what I think people find frustrating about Hakstol is that Ron Hextall gave you this piece. He gave you this guy who he claims was good enough to make the NHL roster because of a strong preseason and a strong training camp. And now you're going to just pull him out of the lineup because he was fairly invisible for a game or two. And I understand that, but you're not, to me, that's not teaching him much if you just keep him out long term. If you do it for a game and sit here and go, watch, focus on these things, watch, you could sit there and go, watch the way Sean Couturier plays the position. Okay, there's a reason. Now you got something to watch. But you do it for a game or two, and then you go right back in and you get to work on it, and you put it back into your system. You don't completely stray the game plan from the kid. And that's what he does a little bit too often for my liking, because I think the comparison there was they can't do to Vorobiev what they did to Travis Sanheim a year ago, which was keep watching. And then at what point were you going to finally decide we should send him down? Before you kept him off the ice for the better part of a month or two. You can't do that.
Well, I think it's the argument that Rob is making from the outside perspective of these people saying that he's like Chip Kelly. It's an oversimplification of either problem because
exactly.
Chip Kelly's problem was that he couldn't communicate with professional players because he was a college coach. Dave Hakstol is probably his biggest his biggest feature is that he is a college coach and he can communicate with younger players and he can develop talent. There's a idea that he can't develop talent, that like everybody's progressing at the rate they would anyway if he wasn't the head coach, which I don't necessarily agree with, just because look at Shane Gostisbehere. Shane Gostisbehere had to run through a wall in a sophomore season just to get into the lineup. And like you said last week, Kevin, he's easily the most calm, collected defenseman on the team right now. And it's because of experience. It's because of the guff that Shane Gostisbehere had to go through in his second season. He had to run through a wall just to get into the lineup. And he's like, I'm never going to have a season like that. And and in his third season, he was really good. He wasn't to the ridiculous proportion that his rookie season was, but he was still very good. And this year, he's easily the most calm, collected defenseman on the team. I think it's more just of a lazy argument. That's just exactly what Rob is saying. It's just, you see that Chip Kelly was the bane of the Philadelphia Eagles' existence because he couldn't communicate with older players and he did a power grab. Dave Hakstol isn't doing either one of those things. He's not trying to get Ron Hextall fired. If he's trying to get Ron Hextall fired, get Dave Hakstol out of here, because obviously he has no idea what hierarchies are or who hired him. So, Yeah, I absolutely agree with Rob. It's a dumb argument. A lot of the arguments against Dave Hakstol are not well thought out. But there are but he does have his problems like any other coach. But the one where he's just Chip Kelly is
right.
I don't know. It's just a Philadelphia thing. I think everyone is just paranoid.
No, I think it's dumb to compare the two because two different sports. The coach in football has way more control over your own players because you can be a coach GM and build your roster and then coach it. I think that Dave Hakstol completely understands that there is a process or not a process, but there is a way that it works in the NHL where there is a hierarchy and there's a GM who puts everything together, a GM who hires the head coach and then says, work with the guys I give you, in a sense. And there's ways to change it and, things like that. I think the problem with Dave Hakstol for a lot of Flyers fans is results-based, and that warrants some merit. The idea is I think that people would feel less obligated to be this way or feel less furious towards Dave Hakstol and the way that they seem, the way they seem to just crucify every move he makes is kind of because it's not necessarily because of wins and losses as much as it is. I don't think people would complain about Dave Hakstol if they went out and they lost a ton of games. The way they lost that 1-0 game to Vegas, where everything is going right and one little mistake costs you. And see, people will turn that into a thing where, not even to turn it into that, but I don't want to, I wanted to say that they'll turn that into well, then they can't score. So that's also his fault. Not if you get beat by just a good goalie and your goalie was good for the same 56 minutes, 57 minutes, whatever it is. And in minute 58, you gave up a goal. What are you supposed to do? Someone was going to give one up at some point. You just weren't the first one to break. It happens. I get the point. I get the point of the frustration when they lose a game 6-3 and you're making these bad turnovers and things like that. I think that the issue with games like the Columbus game, the home opener was one that I think you can pin on coaching a little bit because of the fact that just looked like an effort where you were unprepared from the start. I don't think that any other loss that they've had this season has been a result of being unprepared to play an opponent. It's just lapses. It's making mistakes and not coming back from them. Sometimes that's a player's thing. That's execution more than it is coaching and being part of a system. If you're out of position or you make a play that doesn't work for that system or try to do too much and get burned from it, that's a problem. So I actually kind of I gave Dave Hakstol some credit here for the way that he came out after the game on Thursday and goes, look at the second goal that Columbus scored to tie the game. That's Cam Atkinson's goal. The assist was to Panarin. And he talked about a turnover to the middle of the ice. Well, that turnover was by Claude Giroux. And then he talked about a missed back check. That missed back check was Jake Voracek. And you know what? The next game, Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek weren't on the same line anymore. They were on different lines, and they were trying different combinations because something wasn't working at that point, and it was not going to sit well. And for a change, Dave Hakstol's answer to what do you have to fix, it's everybody's got to do their job. Going a little Bill Belichick there, I guess you could say, right? Do your job and finish your shift, and don't make that stupid mistake and put your team in a bad situation where you have to be bailed out all the time. Yes, a goalie has to bail you out, but you can't make him bail you out 12 times a game. You need him to bail you out maybe 3 or 4 a game. That makes a little bit of sense. So I kind of give Hakstol some credit here. He did everything that he kind of needed to, and he said a lot of the right things. And I like that he's kind of followed up saying some good things with actually getting the results that you wanted out of Saturday's game. You got the right result. You played a strong defensive game. You didn't make near as many mistakes, and you got to win. Now you need to carry that into the next game and start getting consistent because consistency is going to be the answer. So all of that to me makes total sense, and I don't understand why comparisons like that happen, but they do, and that is what it is. Anything else before we wrap, guys?
All right, so I was going to say this last week, but I neglected to do it. I would like to congratulate Steve Coates for getting into the Hall of Fame or the honor roll for Michigan Tech. I know his old stomping grounds. It's been a rough patch for Steve Coates just because he lost his job as the mascot for the Flyers. So it's good that he gets honored, by his old college.
Yeah, no, that was cool. He actually ended up missing him. He didn't do a radio broadcast to be at the ceremony for that, I believe. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Flyerdelphia Podcast. We want to thank everyone for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the Flyerdelphia Podcast. We are on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Trying to do a few more video previews and video recaps as well. We'll work on those throughout the week. Couple games here coming up. Also, remember to check us out on SoundCloud as part of the Sports Talk Philly podcast network. Remember, you can listen to us and shows on the rest of Philly sports through the podcast network. The Phillies Nation podcast on Sports Talk Philly, covering the Phillies. The Pick Swap pod covering the Sixers. Their season just opened this past week. So certainly a lot coming from them in the coming weeks. And the Kelly Green Boys covering the Eagles. And obviously, there's always a lot to talk about with the Eagles as well. So next week, we'll be back. Again, like we talked about, 3 games to look at once again. As mentioned, Monday, Colorado. Thursday, Boston. Saturday, the New York Islanders. And we'll have breakdowns of that once again for you. So thanks for tuning in. For Rob Riches and Dan Heaning, I'm Kevin Durso, and this has been the Flyerdelphia Podcast on SportsTalkPhilly.com. This has been the Flyerdelphia Podcast, part of SportsTalkPhilly.com, with Kevin Durso, Rob Riches, and Dan Heaning.